the way it happened is, so like 1800s, there were all kinds of medical schools. There was what we perceive of as modern medical schools, which are mainly based on pharmacology and drug therapy. There were other sort of medical schools, one's concerned with naturopathy, one's concerned with homeopathy, one concerned with like natural healing. And there was all sorts of medical schools and uh, different approaches to healing people. In 1910, the AMA, the American Medical Association, hired this guy, Flexner, and they asked him to write a report basically analyzing how medical education is in the US. This was their publicized goal, and to make the medical education more scientific. But in reality, what the purpose of this was is Flexner was funded by Rockefeller, and Rockefeller was heavily invested in a lot of the pharmaceutical companies at that point, because the pharmaceutical companies used his products from the oil industry. So he wanted to make pharmaceutical medicine the standard of care. So all of the medical schools that were teaching non-pharmaceutical medicines were basically declared illegal and they were shut down. So most of the medical schools were closed at that point, and only medical schools teaching drug therapy were allowed. And so that's how the problem started, where you are dictating to physicians what sort of learning they would get, and you're dictating to patients what sort of physicians they can go to. And this is where the problem, this is why we are at that point where we are now. It's all centrally planned that you need to see only a certain kind of physician, a certain kind of healing therapy. And all the other schools have basically been forgotten or are only fringe schools at that point, at this point.
It's a genius move by Rockefeller and Carnegie, because they figured out, oh, we can make synthetic vitamins and minerals from petroleum. So let me create this type of medicine where I diagnose them as being sick, and then I give them vitamins to be able to actually cure whatever maladies that they're having. And I think at the time, 1 out of 10 deaths were caused by chronic disease. And now I think it's 7 out of 10 deaths are caused by chronic disease that are really food-driven illnesses. And I think what I've been fascinated by being on Twitter and deep diving everything the last 2 years is it almost seems like there are a handful of stories of what have happened over the last 100 years that almost paint the picture of why we're as sick as we are. I think Flexner is a great one. I think Ansel Keys is a great one. Harry, who was the guy that essentially like made farms go really big as well? What was his name? Earl Butts. And I remember thinking, like, is it actually true that a number of these stories are really what's causing 88% of Americans to be metabolically unhealthy? But the further and further we research between the three of us, I think that's absolutely the case. And something that your brother very famously said in our podcast is that you could essentially wipe your ass with most epidemiological studies and even peer-reviewed studies. And then when you find out that sugar companies are donating 11 times the amount of money to these universities as the NIH, it doesn't become that far-fetched.
100%. And it's all centrally produced propaganda, and it's just, this is how it is in medicine. Classically, I mean, the way classical teachings of medicine, like the way Chinese medicine and Ayurvedic medicine looked at healing, is that each case is different from another case. Even if it's the same disease in the same person, the healing, the way you're going to treat them is different. And so that model doesn't apply with epidemiological studies and even randomized control studies with medicine. And that's also part of the reason why modern medicine just doesn't make sense for patients.
Yeah, I would say that that's absolutely true.